Hello, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good night, wherever you are. Hello. We are still in the COVID 19 crisis. Um, the world is definitely different. I have been talking to you guys for a long time about John List. It's always been a fascinating case to me. He was a family annihilator before the term family annihilator was basically a term at all. Um, by the way, just before we get started, hello everyone. After we get started, I probably won't see the comments. So if you say anything and I miss it, please forgive me if you can find it in your heart. But anyway, hello everyone. I hope everyone's had a great day. As most of you know, I'm a huge Kentucky Wildcats basketball fan. Carl Anthony Towns, that played for Kentucky in 2015. His mother passed away today from complications of COVID 19. So that's some sad news there. Trying to think of anything else before we go over John List. Um, I'm also working on something else for you guys. Try to find it. We're going to talk about another case tomorrow out of Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin. Give me a second. I'm trying to find it here. It's if you guys want to look this up, we're going to talk about it tomorrow. It is out of Madison, Wisconsin, and it's Dr. Beth Potter and her husband. So if you want to look that up, we'll go over that tomorrow. Angela Lassiter says she's sewing cloth face masks if anyone needs any. Are you selling them or what are you doing? If so, how much and how much to ship? Angela Lassiter. So if anyone needs a cloth face mask, get in touch with Angela Lassiter. All right. So hello, everyone. Um, After I start on this John List, I probably won't see the comments. So if you have anything to say, I'll probably miss it. If anyone does a super chat, thank you in advance. I probably won't see it. So I'm going to share the screen now and bring up John List. What I can do is I can actually put you guys on my phone, and that way I can see the comments. What I can do is I can actually let me turn the volume down. Put you guys. All right, I can see the comments now. So might be able to see them. I think you guys can probably see the timeline that I've got up on my screen right now. Can you guys see that? No, Don, we just got started. Okay, so John List was a family annihilator. He killed his wife, his mother, and his 3 children. He was a family annihilator before a family annihilator was even a term. Okay, so September 17th, 1925, John Emil List was born in Michigan to John and Alma List. He was an only child. He had a normal childhood, but he had a very strong religious upbringing. If you see me looking down, I'm trying to read your comments at the same time, so in case anybody says anything. From 1925 to 1942, he was raised in Bay City, Michigan, and he graduated from Bay City Central in 1942. In 1943, he enlisted in the U.S. Army and served in the infantry as a lab tech during World War II. In 1946, after the military list, entered University of Michigan, earned a bachelor's degree in business administration and a master's degree in accounting. He was also commissioned as a second lieutenant in ROTC. In 1950, List was recalled into active duty during the Korean War. On December 1st, 1951, he met and married Helen Taylor. She had a daughter, Brenda. They were married in Baltimore, Maryland. They were married rather quickly on account that Helen claimed to be pregnant, which turned out to be untrue. They moved to California. List was an Army accountant during this time. In 1952, List finished his tenure with the Army. John, Helen, and Brenda moved to Michigan. During this time, John and Helen have 3 children of their own: Patricia, John, and Frederick, known as Freddie. Hello, Lisa S. Helen was an alcoholic and suffering from the effects of syphilis that she contracted from her first husband. Helen's daughter, Brenda, marries and moves out of the family home. John, Helen, and 3 children moved to Rochester, New York. John gets a job at Xerox as director of accounting. In 1965, John is offered and takes a job as vice president of Jersey City Bank in Jersey City, New Jersey. Borrowing money from his mother, John, Helen, and the 3 kids and John's mother move into a 19-room Victorian mansion known as Breeze Knoll. The mansion cost $50,000. John's mother had an apartment on the top floor of the mansion. So she basically had her own apartment, and the top floor was the family lived in the downstairs part of the house. The ballroom had a signed Louis Comfort Tiffany raised glass skylight. The address of Breeze Knoll Mansion is 431 Hillside Avenue in Westfield, New Jersey, if you guys want to look that up. I don't know if you guys can see it, this picture. It's not very big, and I can't make it bigger. It's a picture of Breeze Knoll Mansion. And this picture is taken from 1971. And then here's a picture, like an overhead view of Breeze Knoll Mansion, also in 1971. I don't know. Can you guys see that? Somebody can let me know. It's not very big. I can't make it bigger, but that's just a picture. Hello, sweet Bilby. How are you? And now here is a picture of Breeze Knoll Mansion today. This is actually not the same house that the List family lived in. However, it is still known as the List family mansion. This is actually rebuilt. The actual List family home burnt down in 1972, a year after the murders. The murders occurred in 1971, and they believed it to be arson. I'm drinking and smoking and listening. Well, I'm good. From 1965 to 1971, List would eventually lose his job at the bank, unbeknownst to his wife and family. It was a pattern throughout his adult life. He found and lost several other jobs as well. Though he hid this from everyone, in fear of being viewed as a failure, he began to steal from his mother's bank accounts and eventually became $11,000 behind on the house payments. The Lists were in the middle and nearing the end of a financial disaster, but John List was the only one with the knowledge of this at the time. His 16-year-old daughter, Patricia, had aspirations of becoming an actress. John viewed this as improper in God's eyes. He was very religious. All of John's biggest fears were happening, or so he believed. He felt his family would be split up due to the financial devastation, impending foreclosure of their home. He believed his children were turning away from their faith, and his inability to support his family was about to be exposed to his family and society. Shortly before November 9th, 1971, List went and purchased a souvenir World War II 9mm Steyr handgun, 22 caliber revolver, and ammunition. He begins to go to a shooting range for target practice. Now, the murders, all this happened. This was shortly before the murders on November 9th. On November 9th, 1971, all three children go off to school. List shoots his wife Helen in the back of the head while she is drinking her coffee. List then goes upstairs and shoots his mother, Alma, in the back of the head as she eats breakfast. He later, after the killings, he later writes a letter to his pastor confessing and explaining why he had done this. And in that letter, he tells that the reason he left his mother, Alma, upstairs is because she was too heavy for him to carry downstairs. List returns downstairs, drags his wife's body into the ballroom, and cleans up the blood created from her murder. He leaves Breeze Knoll and goes to the post office to stop the mail delivery, and then to the bank to cash in his mother's savings bonds. List returns to the family mansion and begins to make phone calls to avoid suspicion, including contacting the children's school and telling them the family will be going out of town to care for Helen's sick mother. List then has lunch. Years later, he had an interview with Connie Chang, and he said, "I was hungry. That's just the way it is." His daughter Patricia, who was 16, arrives home from school. He shoots her in the back of the head and drags her body into the ballroom. His youngest son, Frederick, 13, follows the same fate. List then leaves to watch his oldest son, John, who was 15, play a soccer game. So he's already killed his whole family. His son, his namesake John, is the only one still alive, and he goes to watch him play a soccer game. After the soccer game, they actually go, I think it was to Dairy Queen. I'm not sure if it was Dairy Queen, but they go get an ice cream cone, and they eat an ice cream cone. When they return home from the game, List shoots John in the back of the head as he did the others. John did not die easily, by his own account. Though John was his favorite, emptied both the pistols in his son's head, face, and chest. He ends up, I think, shooting a total of 10 times, I believe. But it's been said that his son John fought back, and that's why he shot him so many times. I don't know whether it was only because he was still jerking that I wanted to make sure he didn't suffer, or that it was sort of a way of relieving tension after having completed what I felt was my assignment for the day. That's a quote from John List. List meticulously cleans up the merge scene, lines Helen and the three kids in a row in the ballroom, each neatly in Boy Scout sleeping bags. His mother was put in a closet in the attic with a dish rag around her mouth. Like I said, he would later go on to say that she was too heavy to carry downstairs to put with the other body. Like I said earlier, he then writes a 5-page letter to his pastor with details of the murder included. On November 10th, which was a day later, List searched the entire house for family photos and tore out his image, presumably to prevent police from getting a recent photo of him. He turns down the thermostat in the house to preserve the bodies and turns on organ music on a continuous loop and leaves Breeze Knoll Mansion for the last time. He drives his car to JFK Airport in New York and abandons the car there. They believe in an attempt to, when police found the car, to believe that he had taken a flight, and he hadn't. He then leaves his car at the airport and takes a bus to the city, and he ends up going to Denver, Colorado. John List changes his name to Robert Peter Clark and gets a job as a fry cook and joins the local Lutheran church. He come up with that name, Robert Clark, because that was a former college classmate's name. He ends up taking a job as an accountant for H&R Block and becomes a Sunday school teacher and meets a widow named Dolores Miller. December 7th, 1971, family members, the children's teachers, and neighbors begin to get suspicious from the family's absences. They called the police to do a welfare check of the family. The police arrive and enter the home and discover the gruesome scene. They make note of the music playing, said it reminded them of funeral home music. There was also just a slight odor of decomposition where the thermostat was turned down so low. I got to light me a cigarette. So basically, he done this. What he told his pastor in the letter is he wanted his children to go to heaven, and their mother with them. Why he didn't? I'm assuming he figured if he committed suicide, he would not make it to heaven. That's just my opinion of it. He was, even doing this, according to him, was very religious, and according to everyone else. Yeah, I agree, Mandy. Amanda Texgal, organ music is sure creepy. Don, the reason he done this, he felt like his children were slipping away and he wanted them to go to heaven. So that's why he done this. And just my opinion, the reason he didn't commit suicide is he eventually wanted to be with them in heaven. But I believe he believed if he killed himself, he wouldn't make it. Now, in 1972, like I was telling you earlier when I showed you the pictures, the Breeze Knoll Mansion actually catches fire and burns down, and it's a complete loss, including the Tiffany sign skylight. I'll tell you about the Tiffany sign skylight later and why that's important. Arson is believed to have been the cause of the fire. Years later, another home was built on the property, but still carries the stigma as the List House, and that's the pictures I showed you earlier of the original List House, and then the house that sits on the property now that still carries the name of being the List family home. In 1985, Bob, I believe he goes by Bob, he ends up marrying Dolores Miller, the widow he's met at church, and they moved to Richmond, Virginia. That's in 1985. On May 21st, 1989, America's Most Wanted airs an episode featuring John List, Family Annihilation. List and his wife see the last part of the episode. However, Dolores doesn't make the connection. He said, I was perspiring like anything. Some of List's old neighbor from Colorado, Wanda Flannery, and her daughter was also watching the America's Most Wanted episode. And they were putting two and two together. They was like, no, that can't be Bob. And then with everything they said on the show, they was like, yeah, that is Bob. But in their mind, they were saying, no, that's not Bob. That can't be Bob. And what happened was there was a guy. Let me look. I've got his name in my notes on my phone. I made notes on my phone also about this. Let's see here. The guy's name that did the bust. Frank Bender was his name. He had to figure out what, he wanted to make a sculpture of John List and what he would look like 18 years later. And all he had to go on was old photos of List. He had done other sculptures, but anyways, the sculpture he made ends up being unbelievably close to what List actually really looked like, even down to the thick black frame glasses. So anyway, finally, after seeing the sculpture, his old neighbors in Colorado, Wanda Flannery and her daughter, they was like, yeah, that's him, because the sculpture looked so much like John List, even the glasses that he wore to that day. And the Frank Bender, the guy that did this sculpture, he said that the reason he put those glasses on him is because those would be the glasses that there'd been also like a psychologist or psychiatrist that worked with this guy Bender, and he had come up with like a psychological profile of John List, and he gave him ideas on ways to make his mouth, like how his mouth would be, what kind of glasses he would wear with his type of personality. Because he wore glasses back when he did these murders, so they figured, he still wore glasses. The psychologist said he would be the kind of person that wouldn't wear contact lenses. You know how they do those psychological profiles of people. All right. So anyway, Wanda finally, and her daughter finally says, yeah, this has to be Bob. That's what they call him, Bob. So they call in to America's Most Wanted. Look at my notes here again. I'm sorry, I'm not seeing your messages. Okay, so List had a master's degree in accounting, and he had another job. They found the police show up in Virginia, and they find Robert Peter Clark at the accounting office where he was working. He denied being John List. They asked him, they said, who are you? And he says, I'm Bob Clark. And they said, "Are you John List?" And he denied being John List. Well, they took his fingerprints, and his fingerprints proved that he was John List. So he was arrested. Let me get back to this way I can see your guys' comments. Sorry, guys, I'm going back and forth. I've got notes on my phone and I've got notes on my computer about this. Because I don't know if you remember, I've been wanting to do John List for a while. My cigarette went out. All right, so after she calls the show, John List is arrested and charged with 5 counts of murder for his wife, mother, and 3 children. And he's extradited back to New Jersey. His new wife, Dolores, she's just like, no, this isn't him. I know it sounds like him, but it can't be. She was just in total denial. And keep in mind, he had been free for 18 years. Of course, back in this time, they didn't have all the forensic stuff and everything like they do today. And even then, this was back in 1989 and 1990 when they did this sculpture and put him on America's Most Wanted. So anyway, his new wife, Dolores Clark, which he goes by Bob Clark, so her name's Dolores Clark. He had actually requested and received a new Social Security card before the police had even found his children's bodies. So he had already changed his name and was living under a different name. All right, so Dolores divorces him. On April 12th, 1990, John List is convicted of 5 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms without the chance of parole. He spent 17 years, 6 months, and 23 days at large before being captured. So that's a long time. On March 21st, 2008, John List dies of complications from pneumonia at age 82 at St. Francis Medical Center in Trenton, New Jersey. He was in police custody. He is buried next to his mother, who he shot and killed, in St. Lawrence Lutheran Cemetery in Frankenmuth, Michigan. Just a odd little side note here. He died on Good Friday. Now, these are additional quotes by John List during his 2002 Connie Chung interview. He says, "I feel when we get to heaven, we won't worry about these earthly things. They'll either have forgiven me or don't realize, what happened." He also says, "I'm sure that if we recognize each other, that we'll like each other's company just as we did here when times were better." Another quote, and what he said, "I knew it was wrong as I was doing it. I knew it was wrong." He remains deeply religious today, acknowledges his crimes, violated one of the 10 commandments, "Thou shalt not kill." And of course, these are still quotes I'm going over. Sorry, I need to take a drop of cigarettes before it goes back out. He says, "I finally decided the only way to save them from that was to killing," referring to them turning away from their faith after financial devastation would put up his family. "I grew up with the idea that you should provide for your family, and to do that, you had to be a success in the job that you had, or you're a failure, and that was not a good thing to be." These were all quotes when in his interview. "It was my belief that if you kill yourself, you won't go to heaven. So eventually I got to the point where I felt I could kill them. Hopefully they will go to heaven, and then maybe I would have a chance to later confess my sins to God and get forgiveness." That's going back to what I said about, he thought if he killed them and then committed suicide, they would go to heaven, but he would be cast into hell, and then they wouldn't be together. But if he didn't kill himself, he could ask for forgiveness, and then when it come for his day to die, he would be in heaven with them. He also says, once my mind was made up, it was like it's D-Day. You go in there, there's no stopping after you start. A little additional info. John List was described as being cold and unlikable and lacking social skills, having a rigid personality and being difficult to work with. It's also considered he's possibly autistic, OCD, and narcissistic. Now, remember I was telling you guys about the Tiffany skylight. I feel the most ironic part of this case is the Tiffany skylight in the ballroom that he lined his deceased family under was worth $100,000 in 1971. Today's estimated value would be $570,000. That could have bailed him out of financial devastation that seemed to be the primary reason to annihilate his loved ones. And if you guys can see this, the top three pictures there are List back when the murders happened. The farthest picture over here on the right is what List looks like before he died. And this picture here in the middle is what List looked like when he got caught. Now this bottom picture here, this is the sculpture that was made by the Bender guy, the artist. Now, if you look at the middle photo and you look at this sculpture, just look at how close in comparison they are to each other. And now this guy, Bender, that made this sculpture, like I said, he was going off of old photos of John List, and then like a psychiatrist had put together a psychological profile and told him what kind of facial expressions he would have, how he would most likely hold his mouth, and what most likely kind of glasses he would wear with his type of personality. And if you look, they're dead on. I mean, they're exact. So anyway, guys, and look right here, side by side comparison. Looks like my accountant, looks like my banker, a couple of people said. Now here's the side by side of the sculpture and actual John List when he was caught. Yeah, sure would have long and winding road. I felt like that was the most ironic part of this story, is the Tiffany skylight at the time was worth $100,000. And at the time, you know, I told you guys the house that he bought, the mansion, was $50,000. That would have paid off his house and left him with $50,000. And even though he had jobs and lost jobs, he still had a master's degree in accounting. So he could get a job anywhere. If he could have simply sold that skylight, paid the house off, and found a new job. But he was also worried about his kids going astray from their faith. So it was almost like a combination of two things put together is what pushed him to this point, or in his mind, what pushed him to this point. I've always found the John List murders fascinating. I've talked to you guys over many, 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 many lives about doing this podcast, whatever you want to call it, of the John List case. you can actually go on YouTube. They have a documentary of it. What's the guy's name? Thomas, that does the American Justice. He does one. They've got one. They've got the America's Most Wanted episode up on YouTube. Sorry, I'm checking. I'm looking at something else here. Give me just a second. I'm trying to see if I have these other pictures on here. All right. Don't see them right now, but so anyway, guys, that's the one I wanted to go over with you guys for the longest time. We even had a poll up one time. I can't remember. Somebody commented at the very first comment on this live night. We had a poll up whether we would do John List, or I think it was against Jeffrey Dahmer, and John List won. And of course, you know, the channel went a little off course. But John List, the murders have always been fascinating to me. He was basically the first family annihilator before family annihilator was even a term. And just think, Sweet Billy says, so interesting. Skylight made by Tiffany is at his primary jewelry company. I don't know that if it would have stopped him, you know, from doing this, even if he had known and sold the Tiffany Skylight, because of the fact that, you know, he was also mainly worried about his family going astray. Like his daughter Patricia, she was 16 and she wanted to be an actress, and he just thought that would not be God's will for her to be an actress. And then he had his son John, was 15 at the time, and his youngest son Freddie. Now, of course, his wife Helen, she had another child from a previous marriage who was out of the house and had went on and married. And Helen, his wife, suffered from syphilis as a result of her first marriage. I'm trying to get you some more pictures to show y'all some pictures of the guns that he used and some newspaper articles. I'm trying to get them up for you. Give me just a second, if I can. So anyway, guys, what do you guys think about the John List case? Do you all find it as fascinating as I do? I've told you guys, you know, the whole reason I started my channel was how I got so enthralled in the Chris Watts case. He ended up stealing $11,000 from his mom, Annie, and I never really found out the information if she ever knew that he stole the money or not. It almost sounds a little bit like, you know, maybe she had, you know, quite a bit of money, you know, to steal $11,000 from somebody and them not to notice, or, you know, and she was living in the attic with them. You know, how much money did she have that you wouldn't miss $11,000? I know if someone stole $11,000 from me, I would notice. Definitely. I'd be about $10,995 negative in my balance. Hello, pray for peace. And they said that his children and his wife, he killed them all from behind. He shot them all in the back of the head. Now his son John, he fought back and he ended up shooting John 10 times, and they said John put up pretty much a big struggle. And even John List in an interview said, I emptied both guns into him, into his head, face, and chest. His mother, Alma, they believe she actually is the only one that saw it coming. Now, when John was first shot, his son John, he was shot in the back of the head, and then apparently he turned around and, fought back, and I guess he knew what was going on. Apparently, the other two children and the wife never even knew what happened. Just bang in the back of the head. His mother seen it coming. He wanted all of the bodies to lay together. That's why he placed them all side by side in the ballroom. In his letter to his pastor, where he confessed to doing this, and also, he confessed and basically said, I know I've sinned in doing this, but I'm still alive. I can ask for forgiveness. I can make it to heaven. It was basically an explanation and a confession as to what happened. And, he said in his letter, his confession, that he left his mother upstairs. He didn't put her with the rest of the bodies because that was really important to him, that he have all of the bodies together. He had them in Boy Scout sleeping bags. He put them all in Boy Scout sleeping bags. Okay, so I'm going to try to get you all these pictures now. If you all can see. Give me just a second. Okay. Let me get back on YouTube so I can see your guys' comments. Okay, so here are some. Okay, here's a startup. Here's the two guns that he did the murders with. I'll give you a chance to look at them before I go to the next picture. Okay, so there's the two guns. That's the one on the left is the World War II gun he bought a few days before actually committing the murders. And he actually emptied both of these guns into his son John, who was 15. Here's a windshield voucher at the JFK, John F. Kennedy International Airport, where he parked his car or abandoned his car and then took a bus. They believe he done this. Now, like I said, he had a month head start on the police because it took him a month to even discover the bodies. Now, he left and did all of this on the first day. So his car's been at the JFK airport for 30 days. So he's got a month head start on the police. He's even got his new Social Security card with his new name, Robert Peter Clark. Now, he chose Robert Clark because that was a former classmate. Where he got the middle name Peter, I have no idea. Okay, so there's the windshield voucher for the JFK airport. Here's a stamped airport ticket. Here is a picture from the newspaper. I don't know if you can see the date, but it's Friday, December 10th, 1971, husband's car at JFK. Here's a picture of John List's car. Now, if you remember, this picture in the paper is Friday, December 10th, 1971. So this picture in the paper is probably a day after it's actually found. And if you remember, the murders happened on November 9th. So actually 1 month to the day when they found his car. I don't know, trauma nurse. It doesn't sound like it. It sounds like they've pretty much put everything together with. Okay, so now here is a picture in the newspaper. Of course, this was before he was caught, and it's asking the perfect crime ? List still missing 15 years after killing family. So this newspaper article came out 15 years after the murders and a couple of years before he was caught. And there's a picture of him on the left, and I'm assuming that's a age progressed portrait that they drew on the right. That's what I'm assuming. And then there's a story there that they've put in the paper. Okay, now here is the letter he wrote to his pastor, the confession and the explanation. And as you can see, that he's dated it up in the top right-hand corner, 11/9/71. And I can't read his writing. Maybe if it was bigger, I could. The only thing I can make out is Dear Pastor Reduncle, or I can make out Dear Pastor. I'm very sorry. All this additional burden to you. It's very, it's not very big, and maybe if it was a larger, I could read it, but I can't. But yeah, I can see the date and stuff like that. And then here's the second half of the letter. And then here's a picture of his mom, Alma List. This is just something I'm going to say. She looks like a pretty small and frail woman. So if he thought she was too heavy to get downstairs, he either was a very weak man, or he just lied about that and didn't want to move her. Well, Amanda, this is on that Google Docs, and it won't let me enlarge the pictures on it. Just FYI, I seen your comment. Here's a news article from the Westfield Leader, the newspaper, I guess, in their hometown. This happened in Westfield, New Jersey. I'm going to try to get that letter bigger and deciphered. I'm assuming this is a picture from inside the home. Oh, you're right, Amanda. That does work. Well, thank you. See how untechnologically I am? These are bloody paper towels from the cleanup. Thank you, Amanda. Okay, so now that these pictures are a little bit bigger, we'll go back over them. Okay, so these are obviously evidence bags, and these are bloody paper towels inside the white waste basket. Here's the newspaper article and a picture of the house in the newspaper. John List's mom. Like I said, she looks pretty small and frail and fragile to me. I think, and I'm not 100% sure about this, that she was 81 at the time of this. I'm not 100%. I do know. Let me look at my notes. I've got it in my notes of how old his mother was. 84. Okay, so his mother was 84. And I don't know how old she was in this picture, but when this happened, she was 84. Okay, here's the letter. Of course, it's still. I can't make it out. Here's the top half of the letter. It looks like it says, "I'm very sorry to add this additional burden to your work. I know that what has been done is wrong. For all that I have been taught, and that the reasons that I might give will make it right. But you are the one person that something that not this will at least I felt that I had to do this. I felt that I had to do this. Number one, I wasn't working anywhere. Everything I taught, I thought it's just too hard." Here's the newspaper article before he was caught, and this was 15 years. The article says 15 years have passed, but the search for John List still goes on. Tomorrow, okay, so this was the day before that. Tomorrow marks 15 years since the body of List's wife, mother, and 3 teenage children were found shot to death in their sparsely furnished, deteriorating Hillside Avenue mansion. List, then 46, disappeared shortly after, leaving behind only a note to his minister telling him what he did and why. Now investigators still tracking the man believed to have slaughtered his family have a new angle, a new wrinkle, something they hope shed some light on the case. So it must not have been too good, because it took almost 3 more years to catch him. Okay, so, and then here's the picture of his car that was found a month to the day after the killings. And of course, this car was found at JFK Airport, which they believe he done this just to throw police off, thinking he may have took a flight when he just abandoned the car and took a bus. And then there's the 2 guns he used. to annihilate his family. And this was all before family annihilators were family annihilators. Alrighty. So there's pretty much the John List case. I did research and I brought you the case. I didn't show a video on YouTube. Actual research, pictures. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you find the John List case as fascinating as I do. Like I said, you guys can watch me do it. If you'd rather watch like a documentary on YouTube, there is several to choose from. So if you guys want to check anything out on there, I encourage you to do so. Bill Curtis is the guy's name I was thinking of that does American Justice. He narrates one of the documentaries I watched on John List. And I really like, Bill Curtis's voice when he narrates something on a show. Hey, you guys are welcome. I hope you really enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and I really do hope you enjoyed it. Hello, Michelle Clifford. Thank you. Doing well. Hope you are as well. Hello to everyone. If I didn't say hello to you when you said hello to me, I apologize. I was reading. Yeah, don't forget a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Ooh, I've already got 4 down. All right. I apologize. Whoop. I already got 4 thumbs down. I bet I know who those 4 people are. I'm just kidding. I'm not saying anything. Yes, Carolyn Brenner says there's also an episode on Forensic Files, and you can watch that episode of Forensic Files on YouTube. Well, thank you, Dodie. Yeah, I was actually off work for a couple of weeks due to COVID-19, and I was trapped in the house, and I was looking at my beard, and I got bored. 2 things, and every time I trim my beard, I get so pissed off at myself because it takes so long to grow, but it doesn't take very long to cut it all, and that sucks. But anyway, guys, it's right at an hour. How awesome is that we've done the John List in 1 hour? But like I said, I know I keep repeating myself. I just find the List case so fascinating. A family annihilator before a family annihilator was even a term. You might actually say, well, thank you, Michelle, that he was probably the first. Well, I wouldn't say that. He might have been the first modern day family. I'm sure there's been family annihilators throughout history. If you guys can think of any others, John List is about the first one I can think of as far as back in earlier times. And one of the reasons I really like the John List case is when I first started getting into true crime and watching ID Channel and Forensic Files and all those great shows that have all these, cases and stories and everything we like to hear about. John List was one of the first ones I ever watched. And it was late at night. I can't remember if I didn't have to work the next day, but I was sitting up late and I watched it really late at night. And it really just stuck in my mind. And it's always stuck with me to this day, even through all the others that I've really gotten into. There's a show on ID called Fear Thy Neighbor. I don't know if you guys have ever watched that, but there's one episode where a family moves to, I think it's Wisconsin, to a lake house. And they have a really nice house, and they've got a boat dock, and they do fishing. And they're really just a great, down to earth family. Let me highlight this before I go. Don Brake says, if anyone is struggling emotionally due to COVID-19 virus, please email her at amylittleriches@aol.com. So there's some good support there, guys. If you need anything, if you're emotionally struggling. Now, this one I'm talking about, where the family moves to the lake house, there ends up being an elderly man. Now, this is kind of out in the country. I'm going to try to find this episode. I want to bring you guys this case also. An elderly man moves in next door, and he's just recently suffered a heart attack. He moves into this house in the country that needs a lot of work. It's got a big yard to mow. There's a lot of upkeep to this house for this elderly man who just suffered a heart attack to move into. His son, asked him, Dad, don't move to this house. He had like a small apartment in town where all his utilities were included. His lawn care was included. He didn't have to do anything. But I guess he was bored, and he really just wanted something to do. But he probably moved to a house that was actually too much for him to take care of. When if he would have moved to a house where there was just a small amount, it might have been enough to occupy his time and not too much put on him. Well, anyway, he had all this work, and it was getting to him. And I think there was 4 or 5 kids that lived in this house. And, kids are going to be kids. Well, they ended up getting on this old guy's nerves. And you know how, if you've ever met an old person, and they'll be real nice one day, and the next day they're literally bite your freaking head off. They're up and down on a roller coaster. Well, that's how this old man was. He got pissed off and had a survey done and found out the property line was a different place than what they had been going by. So he ended up, claiming their boat dock and wouldn't let the kids on it. And, I'm going to try to find out the whole story of this case, because it's a really good one. It's off a show called Fear Thy Neighbor on the ID channel. You can download the ID app. For instance, if you have any kind of smart TV, Roku, Amazon, anything like that, download the ID app. I'm pretty sure it's free. For instance, if you have it on your cable subscription, you can watch it for free, and you can watch it on demand. So go to this show, Fear Thy Neighbor, and it's pretty easy to find, because it's just a family that moves to this lake house, and it's really good. I think y'all would really enjoy that episode, especially because it really keeps you glued to the TV throughout the whole episode. But anyway, guys, it's been an hour. I really hope you enjoyed the John List case. We've talked about it for so long, and we've finally done it now. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you enjoyed being with me for an hour tonight. I enjoyed being with you guys. Thank you, Christy May. Appreciate it. Thank you, Don Brake. Ange, anybody I'm forgetting, I apologize, but I love you guys. And I will try my best to put something together and see you tomorrow night. So you guys have a good night and take care. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.